First of all, how nice to see everybody, and thank you for allowing me in today to say a few words about my son, Danny, and what self-advocacy may mean for him. Thank you so much to Campaign for Change for that amazing film and that amazing presentation. It was brilliant to meet Samir and Frankie and Brad, and there was quite a lot of the things that we were being taught from them that my son Danny, who is 27, has similar ways of communicating. He has a diagnosis of autism and profound learning difficulties, and he has major health problems. And he, just like the previous presentation, we get to know Danny not through speech, because he doesn't speak, not through his ability to use words with a computer as Brad does, but through observing him, his facial expressions, his behavior, his body language, his smiles, or indeed his crying when he's upset. And it's knowing him well over the years as his mum, and also some of the people who support him, who have got to know him well. We understand some of the things that he's experiencing because of these ways of communicating that he has. I'd like, if I may, to give you a sort of story about Danny over the years to illustrate what he has been able to tell us, but also to illustrate what we have had to interpret in order to help him. Danny always knows what he wants. He wants his crisps, he wants his drinks, he wants his toys, he wants his music, he wants his family around him. And he can show that by smiling when he sees us, or by going to where the crisps are kept and getting them, because he can walk and he's mobile, so he's lucky in that way. But he doesn't always, I believe, know what he needs. And the example I would give is through his physical illness over his lifetime, which causes him a great amount of pain in his guts, right from when he eats food, right to when he passes his feces out at the other end. It's all very, very painful for him. And those of us around him learnt this because he would cry or scream, or even sometimes hit his head with this pain. And we began to realize the timing of this pain behavior linked to just after a meal, or just after he was about to open his bowels. And he knew he was in pain and he didn't want to be in pain, but because of his profound learning difficulties, he didn't know to interpret that as Danny needs to see a doctor or Danny needs a painkiller. That was for those of us around him who could interpret how he was behaving and think, right, we know that this means he needs medical treatment. Throughout his childhood and his teens, because he has autism and learning difficulties, the doctors didn't really believe me, and they didn't believe some of the people who support him. They would say, oh, well, autistic children cry a lot, full stop. This is what I now know to be what they call diagnostic overshadowing. It means that doctors and health professionals sometimes just see the learning disability or just see the autism, and they don't recognize that because somebody cannot talk or cannot use pictures, it doesn't mean they're not in pain. It just means only those who know them well recognize that they're in pain and that they do need medical investigations. So it took many years of not Danny himself, but I as his mum and people who supported him, to really put a lot of pressure on the medical profession. And in the end, the doctors said, we are not prepared to do any more investigations until a psychiatrist has seen Danny and can confirm that this behavior is more than because he's got a learning disability, more than just because he's autistic. So a psychiatrist came to visit him at home. She was wonderful. And he was being Danny. He was very happy. He was smiling. He was listening to music. He was playing with a set of keys. He loves playing with his keys and his toys. And then suddenly, as was very familiar to me, he started to double up. He started to cry. He started to hit his head. And I said, this is Danny in pain. And it was very distressing, as it always was. His support worker and I enabled him to have a strong painkiller. And I said, in 40 minutes time, the painkiller will have worked and he'll be happy again. And meanwhile, the psychiatrist and I left him with his support worker because for his own dignity, I didn't want someone he didn't know to see him go through that. And 40 minutes later, he was smiling. He actually looked into the eyes of the psychiatrist and smiled at her. And she actually understood what the issue was, that it wasn't anything to do with his autism or learning disability. It was that he had a physical, painful condition. And since then, things have got much better. And when he reached adulthood, the doctors involved in the surgical intervention, the operations he's had to have, they have done more investigations, and they've found quite a serious set of issues that Danny has that are to do with his intestines. And he's had a much better life because they're able to treat it. And he's doing really well now. He'll never be well, but he's able to have very good days and very happy days because of all the medication that he's on. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is to try and demonstrate that Danny can self-advocate up to a point. For those of us who know him really well, it's very clear what he needs. He knows what he wants, but we can interpret that and say, well, actually, he needs medication or he needs to see a doctor. I think he wouldn't understand how to be as effective a campaigner as Samir or Frankie or Brad. If I said to him, Danny, do you want the world to know that doctors should take you more seriously? I don't think he wouldn't understand the question. His understanding of what is being said is very, very limited. So I, as his mum, feel very strongly that we need to campaign for people with learning disabilities and communication difficulties to be taken seriously by doctors. So I do the campaigning in a way on Danny's behalf. I'm aware that there is a challenge here because if I said, Danny, do you mind if I tell you a story? He wouldn't know what I was saying, and he wouldn't necessarily say yes or no. I don't think he has a sense of his life being communicated to other people. So I have made the decision on his behalf that he should be a campaigner and that he should be a self-advocate through me. And how I see it is that I'm his interpreter. If, for example, Samir and Frankie and Brad wanted to make their campaign even more global, if they wanted to communicate the need of changing places in France, it would probably need a French interpreter to translate the words on the video. And I see my job for Danny as being his interpreter, similarly, to make him understood to a wider audience. Now, some people may feel this is wrong, that only Danny can decide whether he does this or not. And I would be very, very interested in other people's reactions and responses. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for inviting me to this. And that, yeah, the film was, the film and the presentation earlier was fantastic and really moving and brilliant that it happens. And Campaign for Change are doing obviously really, really important work. A lot of what Virginia just said struck home with me, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about my son, my Joey, but also about some thoughts that I've been having about self-advocacy recently. So Joey is 24. He has, well, I never know which title we should use: severe learning disabilities, profound and multiple learning disabilities. He also has intractable epilepsy, which fortunately at the moment is under control, but has been a big problem. And he has high support needs. He lives in supported living in Bishop Stortford. He's non-verbal. He's not autistic, not in any way that anybody is very interested in. But he's non-verbal, and he communicates with very, very simple Makaton, which he's kind of devised his own version of Makaton, really, which we understand and speak. He's not very good with tech. He's good with an iPad, but he doesn't use communication assistance. He's mobile. He runs around. He's very lively. He's very small, but very lively. Very happy. Very big smile. Some things that he loves: willow trees, trains, long hair, Frozen, his family, shopping at H&M for his new t-shirts, sausages and spaghetti, and laughing. And he laughs a lot. He's one of the most laughing kids in the world. So just thinking a little bit about self-advocacy and the concept of self-advocacy, which I've been doing. I suppose what I'd say is this: with Jan's help, I've been doing a lot of research about the history of learning disabilities in the long history. And it's just kind of become really clear to me that self-advocacy is the single most important thing that's ever happened in this struggle for dignity and rights and humanity and all the rest of it. It's huge, and has made such a contribution as an idea, as a thought, and as a practice. And it is so important that those advances that have been made are never reversed. It's very, very striking to me. How does self-advocacy apply to my Joey? How does he self-advocate? Well, I suppose one of the things I've been thinking is that we should maybe think a little bit more carefully about the definition of what we mean by self-advocacy, because I don't have learning disabilities, and so I advocate for myself in lots of things, but there are lots of things that I don't, where I need doctors and financial people and lawyers, and I get lots of help and lots of support for all the many things that I am not able to do, even though I don't have intellectual disabilities. So I suppose one should think that maybe self-advocacy, instead of it being an absolute, are you a self-advocate or aren't you a self-advocate, we should think of it more of as a continuum, if you like, a continuum, a spectrum. So when I look at my Joey, and I think a bit like Virginia's Danny, he communicates an enormous amount about what he wants without speech, partly by going and doing it, partly by, I can tell through his eyes, partly through simple Makaton, and partly by knowing him, as of course I do, and various people, both in his family and people who work with him, know him really well. And we can sense what he's wanting and what he's asking. That's motivated by love, of course, but it's also motivated by knowledge. So you can say that therefore he is self-advocating those wishes, those desires. He's mobilizing, telling us what he wants all the time, but it's different from I am speaking and I am telling you what I want and what I need in my life. It's a different kind of It's a different kind of self-advocacy, which goes back to what I'm saying about it being, thinking of it as a continuum rather than a binary absolute. One of the things that I think is of course a fact that it is very, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to know what does Joey want in his life in 5 years' time. You know, those kinds of interview questions won't get a very productive answer. It's the truth of it. So that we do have to, the family and professionals and others have to obviously occasionally make some decisions about that. And I am acutely aware that I'm making those, we are making those on his behalf. But if those things are motivated by, and I feel this really passionately, are motivated by love rather than control, that what you're actually doing is you're enabling and you're helping as much as you possibly can. I think one of the things that I do feel, and I'm not a professional in this area, but that much as I admire and respect the huge numbers of professionals that we come into contact with, I think that the family and friends and those kinds of people are very closely connected, mustn't become the obstacle. It's got to be co-produced, whatever these views going forward are. The notion about speak up, which of course is a valuable concept, and with somebody but with somebody who can't speak. One of the things that I've really come to notice is the real importance of the physical presence of the person being there. So, you know, when we go and have, you know, all those endless bloody meetings that you have to do as a parent of a profoundly disabled kid, you never stop having meetings. Bringing Joey to those meetings is really important. Now, he gets really bored because he's got much better things to do than sit around shuffling bits of paper and, you know, hearing people drone on. But we always, and have always had, right through his life really, is bring him to the meeting. And what I think that is doing is that his presence is speaking, if you see what I mean, is reminding everybody of the reality of this entirely fully formed three-dimensional human being. And that has its own, that communicates its own reality, is what I think. So those are the thoughts that I have about this issue. And I suppose my biggest feeling is we need to get beyond a kind of an either or, and start sort of seeing that it's richer and more kind of humane in three-dimensional ways, if you understand what I'm trying to say. That's what I've got to say. I'm really happy to have any questions or thoughts or challenges.
Thanks, Steve. If I just quickly share this video.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Yeah,
really, just so we can introduce him to everybody.
Yeah.
It's just not turning up as one of the main things. Let's see if I can. Can you all see the video? Does it come up?
Yep.
Hi, everybody. This is Joey, right? And Joey's not very good at screens. He doesn't really like screens very much, do you, Joey? And he's got other things that he really wants to do. But anyway, here's Joey, and he's got his new T-shirt on. His new brightly coloured T-shirt, haven't you, mate? Do you want to show the T-shirt to the film, love? Now, Joey is very nice, okay? And Joey is 24, okay? And Joey wants his breakfast at the moment. But Joey's 24 and he's non-verbal. And what does Joey like best of all in the world? Is he likes T-shirts. He's going away. And I thought that he would do this very well. But anyway, that is Joey. And he's very nice. And I'm Steve. And I hope that's of some use to you guys. All right. All the best. Joey.
What do you do?